Well, good afternoon, investors. Welcome to the mid-June sweltering edition of Bull Sessions. My name is Mark Robertson. I am joined here by Ken Kavula, who is apparently overheating in mid-Michigan. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, Mark. I'm not overheating as long as I stay inside, but we've been doing some gardening, and my goodness, has it been warm outside to do some gardening, I'll tell you.
And we're also joined here by Houston's favorite son, Matt Spielman. Good
I
afternoon,
definitely
Matt.
don't have that honor yet, but I'm working on it.
Working on it. And I think Kim may join us later. We do actually have Kevin Galogli also with us. Kevin, good afternoon, sir.
You guys are in trouble now.
Well, I apologize in advance for any McDonald's references I may or may not have recently made. So,
Mark, I have a hand in the air, and I'm going to see if Judy wants to talk to us. Judy,
go for it.
If you want to talk, you have to unmute yourself, Judy. And I'm going to assume that's an inadvertent hand. Judy, I'm going to take the hand down, and if you want to talk to us, put that hand back in the air again, okay? Continue, Mark.
Okay, well, the RV on the upper right is the RV we took with the grandsons down to Indiana. It's actually not. That's the one that Ken's going to buy me for Christmas. I thought that would be a nice RV to have. Pretty deluxe features. So this is a bit of a tribute to travel, and we will kind of close with this theme. And I also wanted to dispel the notion that is Ken actually boarding behind that Malibu boats on the lower left with his chiseled body.
Yes. Mark, does that car go into that RV? Is that what that is supposed to signify up in the upper right there?
It does. That's a retractable pad, and apparently it just latches up underneath in there, and it would be a pretty neat thing to have, I would think.
An RV with a garage.
Yeah.
All right.
Have you guys been to the RV Hall of Fame in Elkhart, Indiana?
I've driven by it 50 times.
You gotta go. You gotta go.
That's a good spot. I think I will take our 4-year-old grandson there. We took him to an expo, and he was actually the inspiration behind this past week's vacation. About a year ago, he said, "Grandpa, let's go buy an RV." And we didn't buy one, we rented one, but we did go down to Noah's Ark near Cincinnati and had a great time. Anyhow, back to the investing front. So we are going to talk a little bit about that industry towards the end of the session. We're also going to cover some nominations for Buttonwood and a little bit of an update on the consulting industry study that Ken's club had done. So with no further ado, let's go ahead and roll. All right. Well, Ken, you announced the largest Buc-ee's a couple of weeks ago, and it only took them 2 weeks to beat the record.
Oh my goodness!
They apparently put in
Luling, Texas, huh? All right.
Yeah, where's Luling? Is that anywhere near you, Matt?
I don't think so. I know it's tiny. I don't know where exactly it is.
Luling, Texas. I'd never heard of it.
It is okay. Yeah, it's in hill country. It's between San Antonio and Austin, straight south of Austin.
Okay.
Near I-10. That's the important thing. It's near Interstate 10.
So they continue to go, and of course Matt is carefully monitoring for any signs of IPO activity from Buc-ee's. I do want to thank all of you who bolstered the stock price of Portillo's while I was on vacation last week. In the very far lower left or lower right, you can see that the stock price jumped from 10 to 10.50 something, and proceeded to go back the other way when I finished my travels. So
could you buy a combo meal at Portillo's for a share of stock?
I did. We did have a Portillo's in there at one point. So we did our part on the.
Matt, I need to correct that. You said singular. It was plural.
All right, here's our standard disclaimer. No investment recognition is intended. This is about education for the illustration and demonstration of some philosophies, methods, and techniques made famous by the modern investment club movement, personified by the National Association of Investors, now known as Better Investing, or by us here at Manifest Investing. We literally try to take what we know is important and focus on a few key characteristics for any potential investment, whether it's a stock or a fund. And that's basically what we'll be demonstrating here today. Please do your own homework on any potential investment before you make that decision. If we own something that we're talking about, we will try to remember to disclose that. And we do believe that you're smart enough to make your own decisions about the resources and opportunities that you pursue. If you would like copies of the slides, or if you have questions for future topics, our 2 email addresses are down there at the bottom. We do have a roundtable a week from today. That'll be our June roundtable, so there'll be more information out on that pretty soon. That is our monthly webcast where we put 4 or 5 companies over the coals a little more assertively than we do most of the time. So good stuff. Any other comments, Ken? I got to put the slides back
No,
in.
but Mark, I'm going to attempt to hitch up to my hotspot, and I'll be off for a couple seconds here, okay?
Okay. If you want to be added to the email reminder list, I took the slide out. I forgot to put it back in. You can go to Better Investing, the Mid-Michigan chapter, and actually go to their events listing, and that will take you to a sign-up sheet for their email list. All right, while Ken is out there navigating around, here is a question that came in from one of our colleagues here in Michigan. Bob Shaw is one of the leaders of the Michigan chapter here in the Southeast Michigan area. And he's just simply pointing out that it just feels like the stock market's gotten a little bit frothy again. The point he's making with this slide is it took 28 years to go from a nominal investment up to $150,000, but then only 6 years to go from that $150,000 up to 300 something. So it's definitely ramping up, definitely shows the power of compounding, but the market has come off of that trough that it had post-pandemic, and it's taken off pretty respectfully. So just wondering, is a little bit frothy. So that is something that we talk about every week with the following slide, but this one just simply makes the point that those magnificent 7 that you keep hearing about continue to rock and roll, and the S&P 500 is on quite of an upswing, and it seems to be persisting here in 2024. Ken, are you back with us?
Almost, Mark, almost.
Okay. Are you like in the middle of some cyber limbo?
No, I'm on the hotspot, but I have to get some power to my phone, or my phone's going to go dead. So there we go. Okay, I'm back 100%, Mark.
Okay, got a backup policy there without a generator.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't think we need to belabor this. This continues to be true. I'm a little bit surprised that it's persisting with the amount of intensity that it is. But those companies did take a pretty good time off from in the first half or first 3 quarters of 2023. So some of that is just simply recovering and getting back to trend.
Mark, I want to point something out that's related to this, and that maybe clubs and even individuals haven't thought about as much as they should. Because of the concentration in the top 4 or 5 or 6 stocks in the S&P index, if you're trying to beat this S&P index, and if you don't own 3 or 4 of those really high performers in your portfolio, you're finding it extremely difficult to beat the S&P 500 in the last year or so. We talked about that at length at our club last night about why we were lagging the S&P so much. And we were lagging it because we only owned 2 of the top 5 or 6 stocks. We owned...
Oh, you're dropping out a little bit again, Ken.
Google, and we own Microsoft, but we don't own others in that group. So I'm Am I off or am I on?
You're on right now,
Hello?
but you did drop out for just a second, a couple seconds. Are you still there now?
Testing?
Ken, can you hear us?
Okay, well either. Okay, so I'm gonna stop the point, except I can hear you, Mark, but I don't think you can hear me, can you?
Intermittently. So I don't know if the hotspot's helping or not.
Okay, all right, I'm gonna try what I can. I'm
Okay.
gonna try. Okay, you keep going. All right.
Okay, I think Ken's making a very valid point. If you're actually finding a way to resist those companies at the top of the list, probably not the best idea. Many of us own these. In fact, the companies that are listed on here are the top 10 from our most widely followed companies. So again, you have to have a handful of those if you hope to keep up with the market under these conditions. The other side of that 493 and beyond that is true is down at the bottom. You can see that small cap growth has lagged the market for the last several years, and it usually leads it. It's usually ahead, and the fact that it's behind here, as much as it is, just kind of suggests that there is opportunity outside of that magnificent seven. You just have to be patient, wait for it, shop diligently, and that sort of thing. But again, these are our 10 most widely followed companies. We added Home Depot, Stryker, and CVS Health in response to a recent email wondering how numbers 8, 9, and 10 have done. And of the group of 10 most widely followed companies, only CVS Health has achieved a somewhat frustrating return level. So it's just a good
Mark,
reminder.
can you hear me now, Mark?
We can.
Okay, we're getting an interesting question from Len, and he wants to know, where does NVIDIA rank on the most chosen on the dashboards at the moment? Do you know?
On the groundhog dashboards
Yes,
or
on the groundhog dashboard. Well,
uh,
in general, on the manifest dashboards.
NVIDIA has climbed all the way to 14th or 16th among the
Okay,
most widely followed stocks, and it's
okay.
showing no signs of slowing down. And it is very widely held amongst the groundhog challenge participants. So much so that it took me probably an hour to correct all of the dashboards for the NVIDIA 10 for 1 stock split. And I don't like stock splits. That's part of the reason why. All right, here's the second part of the question. I mean, we don't really care quite so much about markets because we invest in stocks. We find individual equity and stock opportunities. But this is kind of the answer to the question also. I don't think the market is overly frothy. It has kind of returned to fairly normal levels as depicted by the position of that last green bar, which will actually be locking in here in a couple weeks. Pretty close to that long-term trend line, that regression through the stock market as measured by the value line standard edition. And you can see that the two forecasts that we feature, the value line median appreciation projection is checking in at 10.7%. Our stocks, slightly different universe, but similar. My par, the median projected annual return is at 9.7. So you're talking about a 10 to 11% return forecast, which is actually fairly normal. The recovery has been fairly rapid over the last 9 months. So we're feeling that. But is it terribly frothy? Maybe, but I don't think so.
Mark, have you ever seen a chart that shows the stock market gains in terms of constant dollars, like maybe from 1930 or 1940 or 1950, anything like that?
I've seen a variety of different presentations, including denominated in gold. I don't recall seeing one recently.
I'm just
What are you thinking?
wondering if some of the, well, I'm thinking that how much of the froth disappears if you try to use constant currency rather than the actual dollar amount. I mean, we all know that when Grandma gave you $1 for your birthday back when you were 5 years old, that dollar was worth a heck of a lot more than the dollar I might give to my granddaughter today for her birthday.
True.
So I'm just wondering if we could come up with a chart that kind of took away the effects of inflation and showed us what the stock market itself was really doing in constant currency. I guess I'm putting out there a challenge to some of our data miners to see if they can come up with something to demonstrate that concept.
Yeah, and that is something we could do. You could look at when Wall Street or any academics talk about real returns, they're talking about the return adjusted for inflation.
Yep.
And so we could graph that. So that's kind of part one of a much bigger topic. Part two is one that I found fascinating looking over the works of George Nicholson a few years ago, where he pointed out that inflation also shows up in our stock studies as an increase or a boost of the top line, basically the sales line. And it's a fascinating thing when you walk it through. You know, and his whole point was invest in stocks. You want to have a real relative return to the market, and certainly better than inflation. And but also he pointed out that there are actually attributes or influences on the fundamental performance of a stock that benefit from inflation. So really kind of a, what do they call it, a paradox? Because we know that it kicks the PEs generally lower, but if the growth is high enough to offset that, inflation can be a benefit to an investor. I know, much deeper topic. We don't need to go into it here, but it's very provocative and something that Nicholson talked about. Anyhow, well, here's the second half of the answer to Bob. And one of the reasons that I believe we're in a relatively normal situation. And again, this is basically taking our database and looking at using the return forecasts to drive the buy, hold, sell. Think of them as zoning if you want, but our zoning basically keeps track of the return forecast based on the company core characteristics. We also do not sell stocks with double-digit growth rates, or we're reluctant to do so. And then we also, keep track of that general market condition. When you do that, you end up with this distribution, which I think is probably pretty normal. And I would argue better, and I'll have the numbers for you next week, better than what you see from analyst recommendations on Wall Street, which are going to be heavily weighted towards the buy with virtually no sells.
Mark, here's a logical question to follow up on what you just said. What would this graph look like if it were indeed frothy, if the market were indeed as frothy as Bob suggests?
That's a great question. I think in our world, this graph would actually shift down, more holds, more sells.
That's my instincts as well, that the sells would move up, the holds would move down a little bit, and the buys would move down quite a bit. Yeah.
If it really were that situation, yeah. And I don't think you would see that same response from the analyst recommendations. When they say buy, hold, or sell, the firms are significantly biased to the upside, to the buy side. And it's not even close. And I'll show that to you next week, and we'll continue to cover this topic, and just kind of watch this over time. So good, clean fun. All right, here's another tidbit for everybody. One of my favorite tennis players of all time, Roger Federer, and he recently gave a speech at Dartmouth. I haven't listened to it yet, but I suspect it's pretty good. He is holding a tennis racket at the podium, which happens to be a tree. First, I'd noticed that. But here's the interesting point, and I had no handle on this either. As part of his speech, he points out that, of all the matches he played, he won nearly 80% of the time. But when it came down to the individual points in all of those contests, he asked the audience, what percentage do you think he won? And that was only 54%. And that's kind of staggering, that 54% could lead to that. And then I think back to Matt's presentation of Joel Tillinghast pointing out that we really only have to have 55% winners to achieve the same thing in the stock market.
And Andy Duke's estimation for poker players.
Yep. So you're looking for that small advantage, and we think that the modern investment club movement really delineates that advantage most of the time. Sometimes you could get unlucky, but when you see the results achieved collectively by people in the modern investment club movement, it's really pretty impressive. Any thoughts, Ken? You've seen me play tennis. Please.
I've seen you play tennis. We're not going to talk about that, okay?
Good.
But I would like to hear this.
That's a visual I don't want to see.
I would like to hear this entire commencement speech. If you get a link, Mark, maybe you can post it in the Manifest Forum, because I really would like to listen to him talk about this. It's fascinating that I would never have guessed that the percentage of winning points was as low as it is in order to win 80% of the matches. I never would have gone that low.
No, and nor would I. I mean, I can remember a whole bunch of times when he walked off winning all 4 points of games, So interesting stuff. All right, we already covered this one. Again, no other major points to be made other than we continue to believe that the small cap, and that's not even the right word, small company, promising companies, faster growing companies are still a pretty great place to be shopping. All right, here's our groundhog update. It's 2 weeks between updates, so we should see a little bit more volatility in the standings, and we do. There's a whole bunch of 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and a few 80s amongst that top 40. My name is still absent. I haven't figured out who to blame yet, but I will, and probably correct it in some way.
Portillo's would be my guess.
I didn't pick Portillo's yet, and no A2 milk either, although that would have helped me this time. Fascinating to see the clubs up there, Ken.
Well, and I'm noticing that Mid-Michigan clubs are making a dash towards the top here. Mary Reynolds in 15th place is the president of the Antique Warehouse Club in 11th place. So her two clubs have done extraordinarily well. Ken Kavula is the president of the Wolves. I'm up there number 8, but my club's down in 37. And we lost 10 points in the last couple of weeks here. So we'll have to see well, we can't do very much in this particular portfolio except cross our fingers and pray a little bit. So,
yep. I think, Matt, did we figure out that Investment Club of America had Broadcom? Is that what we
Broadcom, yeah. It has many of the Magnificent Seven, and Broadcom, I think, is now the second largest position behind NVIDIA.
And Antique Warehouse was just pretty well distributed across everything, huh?
We thought they had a big move in Zemler is the second lowest, the 5th out of 6 positions. They have a big cash position too, but we thought maybe Zemler had a big move.
Semler did make a big move when they announced that they were going to become a Bitcoin holder. So that helped, and I know that helped a little bit in that portfolio. I don't know how much. I know that in a club that owns Semler, and it went from a big loss to a big gain in just the last 3 weeks.
Yeah,
so
we're going to see that momentarily with our best small companies update. It's done pretty well. All right, just a couple other tidbits. We are up in that 40% range for the number of the participants beating the Wilshire 5000. 40% is pretty high, considering that the average mutual fund is probably closer to 10% of mutual funds in any given year, maybe a little bit more than that. The average return from our groundhogs is 7.3. That stacks up against the Wilshire 5000, which is going to be very heavily influenced by the Magnificent Seven stocks also. It's cap weighted, checking in at 10%. And again, that opportunity that is there, at least intuitively by us, with that value line arithmetic average down at 4.8. This is a pretty good sized gap. So we did pretty well starting last October with our best small companies, and those conditions continue to persist. Graham Steffen's monkey did slide down 40 positions to 85th this week, so took a little bit of the heat off of us, Ken.
I'm glad to see it swooning. I really am happy about that.
All right, so speaking of launch pads, here's your update on the selections we made last Halloween. And this is a slide from the National Convention, the small company presentation that I did. I really hope I'm not jinxing this, but so far so good. We are checking in at closer to 40-something% right now since October, since Halloween, and let's keep our fingers crossed that we could be headed for one of our better results over the years, and perhaps we really do have a return to the right type of launchpad moments. So here's the portfolio as it stands today. We have generated 42.6% return versus a market that's checking in at closer to 20%. So we'll take that. And as Ken was mentioning, Semler was our second worst performer the last time we looked at this list, and they jumped all the way up into the top half of the list just recently. And some pretty good performance from NAPCO, Nova, which was a roundtable selection. Shockwave, of course, got taken out by Johnson & Johnson. What else do you see here, sir?
Well, I'm just thinking to myself, rule of 5, Mark, and I'm looking at the 4. I'm looking at the total return column, and I'm looking at the 6 at 60% or above, and the 4 at in negative territory. I'm looking at the 1 column in, Mark, the total return column, and I'm saying to myself, boy, that rule of 5 really plays out fairly nicely in a portfolio, even as small as 20 stocks here. It's not perfect, but it's certainly showing me the 5 or 6, 4, 5 or 6 that are performing much better than we ever anticipated. I don't think we ever anticipate total return of more than 50% in a year, and of course we don't anticipate negative return in a year. So there's your outliers, and there's your vast middle going down there from Green Brick down to Neogen. Or maybe it's Excel Services. Yeah, it is Excel Services.
Yeah, so. And some of those that have been sluggish are probably fairly worthy studies down here in this area of the list, unless, as Ken, I believe we were talking before the session, XPEL apparently came out with confirmation of some fairly nasty news that has taken place over the last several months.
I don't think XPEL confirmed it, Mark. I think investigative reporting confirmed the fact that they were doing a lot of hedging of some of the numbers they were putting out there about their business. So
that would be in the realm of creative storytelling or
creativity, right?
Wishful thinking. Again, yeah. Sometimes the company's officers get caught up in the challenge of cheerleading and maintaining a very positive perspective, and they get caught being overly optimistic. I'm being as generous as I can be. But it happens. It happens. You know, Globant is another example of a company. We're going to talk towards the end about the consulting study done, and Globant is right in that mix of everybody in that entire industry of management consulting and IT consulting is getting wrecked right now. So we'll keep going and go ahead, Ken.
Folks, if you haven't heard the story of Semler Scientific, essentially in about a minute, they have a really great device to deal with peripheral artery disease, to deal with its its discovery of it in a person, and the sooner you can diagnose it, the better off the human being happens to be. But Semler was very unlucky that Medicare would not code it and allow the doctors to charge Medicare for this procedure, which is non-invasive, uses a very small, non-invasive piece of equipment that can be done in a doctor's office. They're not going to supposedly reconsider this refusal to put a code to it for 3 years. And Semler basically has said that's going to impact greatly the sales of our device, which has all of the proper FDA certifications and all of the proper medical boards endorsements and everything, but Medicare doesn't like the fact that it costs money and they refuse to code it. So Semler turned around and took its pretty hefty store of cash and put it into Bitcoin. And so what you have right now is a company with a very promising medical device, but it's really a Bitcoin play now. Now, of course, we don't change this portfolio in the middle of the year, but that discussion is going to be coming to the clubs that own Semler and to the people that own Semler. And it's going to be a personal decision. You know, do you still hold a company that you bought because of a promising medical device, and now it's become a Bitcoin play? What's your feelings about Bitcoin? Where do you think it's going to go? Is it a legitimate investment in the first place? You know, is it an asset class? All those questions have to be answered, and that's what's happening with this Semler Scientific. So far, the upward movement of about $20 on a 20-some-odd stock says that the market likes what it did. But the market is very fickle, and there's a lot of retail investors that buy before they think. Witness AMC, witness, well, I won't go into the different meme stocks, you know what they are. And Semler has the opportunity, I think, to become yet another highly talked about meme stock if it continues on this path. The stock went up another $5 when it announced it put another couple of $1 million into Bitcoin. So they're telling you how much they own. They're telling you when they buy it. And you just have to decide whether the growth in Bitcoin is going to be enough to boost that stock price to a place where it's an attractive investment for yourself.
So sorry, you tell me I have to add a line to our stock analysis to account for, no, don't even go there. All right. And Kevin,
well, as a little part of it, I did a presentation on Semler for our digging into the BI that people can find up on YouTube. I'm not as sanguine as Ken is with the Bitcoin, because even with the latest edition, it still is only about 60 million in cash in there, and they're still with their primary business. And I tend to think that the business is there, but yes, it is a concern for folks that, are you getting something like, what was the company out of Virginia, Digicom, something or other, that became basically a proxy. It was almost an ETF for Bitcoin. And they ended up sort of morphing into that. But yeah, it's just something to consider.
Absolutely.
We're getting an interesting comment, Mark, from Sharon Saris. I know Sharon. She lives down, she's in the Northwest Buckeye chapter. She was a director down there, and she belonged, maybe still belongs, to the B.I. Brighton investment club up here in Michigan. And she says she runs a vascular practice. And the problem with the Semler device is that it still requires another step if the PAD is actually screened and detected. And she says so far it's increased testing costs, and it's not improved the outcomes due to this screening. So that's another take on Semler that I've never seen in the printed evidence that's been out there for the company. Sharon, maybe you'd like to post this right into the Manifest Forum. I think that this is certainly a different take on the company, and it gives some ammunition. Maybe if you could show a couple of sources that back up this argument, that would help folks make some better decisions about Semler as well.
Absolutely. Maybe something we dig into a little bit deeper during our next update on this particular company. All right, so with that, let's go ahead and talk Buttonwood a little bit. Here is
Hey,
the
Mark, before
yeah.
you get off that last thing, we also have a comment from Debbie out there. And Debbie says that she's heard rumors about ingredients in Celsius products and Monster products that cause cancer, that have a cancer risk. But she can't find any real evidence to back that story up that seemed credible. And she's just wondering if anybody else has any actual evidence that those rumors have any truth behind them. We'll put the question out there, Debbie, and then we'll ask folks if they find actual evidence that they think is credible, again, to post that on the Manifest forum and reference Celsius and Monster both, because I know they're held by many members in the community, and it certainly would be information that they'd like to have as they manage their portfolios.
Yeah, I continue to be impressed by the takeover of shelf space by Celsius in the local grocery stores. It's the first I've heard any mention of the cancer specific thing, but boy, we certainly have seen a number of instances where cancer causes have ended up in class action type things and that sort of thing. So it's worth kicking around and seeing what you can find. I will make a point that if I want to chase down some commentary on something like that, maybe this is something we can demonstrate. My notepad page is getting here fairly full here, Ken, but Twitter, for all of its teeth clenching glory, when you're trying,
I like the adjective, Mark. Keep going.
but if you go in and you actually search on $ticker in Twitter, you can actually discover individuals who, much like Sharon or others, are sharing, what's really happening out there in the hands of the doctors and that sort of thing. We've used it for our Ardelyx, for example, and the opposite story is true there. The practitioners are actually saying this is working pretty good, folks. Let's keep moving with this. I think if there's any legs to the story, following either Monster or Celsius in that manner might be a way of uncovering some other opinions, and just be aware of them. All right. Good to go, Ken?
Yep.
All right, here's the current Buttonwood portfolio. It's actually doing pretty well. I don't have a total return number at this point, but most of the positions, more than half of the positions, are above their starting point, so that can't be too bad of a deal. My genius selection of Vertra went from 160 to 200 back to 100, so I'm humbled. The cash position is current, so we do have room for 3 more positions here over the next few weeks, and we'll round out the portfolio.
Just for reference, the purchase is about $145. Am I remembering correctly, Mark?
$162.50 is what we started with.
$162. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And that was based on our original 16 company target.
Okay.
Excelis has rebounded a little bit. Here's just a quick overview. It is with real money. We put in another $100 every month, and we are going to demonstrate taking a look at the portfolio. Obviously, we're still going outside the portfolio versus adding to existing positions, but that'll change here over the next few months. And we will be doing a demonstration of when to sell or trim. And the point is, we are trying to keep our growth rate fairly assertive with core companies involved, with the suitable quality. So when we say assertive, we simply want to keep the growth rate higher than average for an average portfolio. So what do we mean by that? 14% or more. It's currently at 17, so we're going to try to keep it there. And we'll try to bring that par into line with being 5 percentage points greater than the market. Quality is good. PE is okay for an ambitious portfolio, and our financial strength and EPS stability are pretty good too. So
It's actually a pretty decent yield for a portfolio that's aimed at growth, you know, Mark?
Absolutely.
Yep.
So that kind of summarizes where we are headed. So with that, just a quick visual on Veeva. And Ken, would you like to walk us through why you think Veeva belongs in the Buttonwood portfolio?
Well, Veeva is med tech. We've many times in the last 20 years have been able to find companies that have been on the cutting edge of medical technology, whether they've been helping doctors do scheduling or whether they've been helping hospitals operate more efficiently. You can see the different types of services that Veeva offers. It first came to my knowledge, 15 years ago when it was presented as an extremely small stock by the Rocky Mountain chapter in their monthly program about small stocks. And I've been following it off and on ever since. I've only owned it once in one club, and that was for a very short amount of time. We had to buy out a partner, and it went the way of a small holding and never came back into the portfolio. But if you're looking for up, straight, and parallel, I think if you check the sales lines and the earnings lines, you certainly have it. The quality is top notch for the company, and it's been steadily rising since the middle of the last decade. Has what I think is an extremely attractive growth number to it. Mark can circle it up there. It's 4 or 5 dot lines down on the top, and it's at 15%. I think that's a very attractive growth for what I would consider to be a mid-sized company when everything is said and done. And the expectations for a mid-sized company might actually be somewhere in the 7 to 12% range. So I think this one has the potential to grow even better than the typical mid-size. We're getting PARs that are in double digits right now. The Prove is doing a decent job of confirming the PAR. I would prefer them to be a little bit closer, and I think 1 or 2 of our other candidates have them a little bit closer. But this is a company in a place that we don't have any kind of holding at all in the portfolio. The closest we come to Veeva in the portfolio presently is United Health, which is basically a straightforward healthcare insurer. This is healthcare technology, if you will. It's not technically a tech company, but it is technology for the healthcare sector. And I would suggest that it's a great one to add to the portfolio.
Yeah, I see a couple of things here. First, it is fairly close. If it's in this return forecast range, it's near multi-year highs. It's been higher, obviously, back the 10 years ago that Ken was talking about originally owning it. The other 2 things that I see are a plateau or declining stock price during a period when the earnings are going up. And again, I'm not going to belabor the point. Anytime that's happening, that means it's steadily improving as a potential investment coming off of this low, which happened when the stock price actually jumped up from double digits to, I believe, $350 or $400 at one point back in 2021. That's what caused that point. The other thing that I find here that's fairly interesting, and I'm going to write them a note when we get done with the session, that they need to take some of this and put it in Bitcoin. They have $5 billion in their wallet, and they only have liabilities of $1 billion. So this is a company that is well positioned to invest in very intelligent things. They've shown the ability to do that. I'll bet they haven't thought through the Bitcoin thing yet, though. So maybe there's hope. So yeah, I like the company for its presence in all of those life sciences areas. And Ken is infamous for his students' suggestion. Again, now the name's going to escape me. I could have thought of it. So your Simulations
Plus, yeah.
They're in, this company's in that area too a little bit. So that can be a very promising area. And of course, our affiliation with the great Irishman, Hugh McManus. This one just fits very well. So I'm going to second the nomination. We'll go with that.
Okay.
Here's the second one that was brought up, Fortinet. Internet security, as I understand it, You want to expound a little bit?
The PAR is not especially compelling to me. It's under 8% on this study. The return on value kind of verifies that PAR at 6.2, the proved number. So we're getting validation for it. What attracted me to the stock was, first of all, that we talked at the last bull session 2 weeks ago about we really would like to put a little bit of technology into the portfolio, and this is a tech right in the middle of tech's cybersecurity. And then I really appreciated the sales growth on this company at 18.5%. Now, when you have a sales growing at 18% and the forecast to the future is only 8%, I think that's telling you the stock might be a little bit overvalued at this point. This is not the favorite of the four that I am nominating tonight, but I do think it's a company that's worth a lot of consideration. And again, I really like the idea that it's a mid-sized company. We have up, straight, and parallel for quite a few years, and we've had a relatively flat price range while the earnings have been increasing for the last 2 or 3 years. There is a lot of competition in this particular sub-industry, in this cybersecurity area, and we'll just mention CrowdStrike and Palo Alto Networks. We'll even mention a company called Checkpoint, which does cybersecurity as well. And there's another list as long as your arm, many of them not profitable at the moment or not profitable in the foreseeable future. But Fortinet and some of the ones I just mentioned have been profitable. The sales growth has been consistently moving in the right direction, and the price range has followed that sales growth. And that to me is a good, solid, that's the model we're looking for 80% of our portfolio. So I'm suggesting that Fortinet is a candidate. I'm not sure it's the strongest candidate for the portfolio at this moment, Mark.
I think if we were sitting in a club of a dozen or 16 members, a number of them would be inclined to say, okay, good area, good story, good topic, but shouldn't we put it up against CrowdStrike and the others that you mentioned? And I think
absolutely
that would be a pretty good practice. What is the best in class?
In fact, Mark, in the next month and a half, the B.I. Baker Club is going to be doing a study, and we're going to be studying Checkpoint, Fortinet, Palo Alto Networks, Qualys, and CrowdStrike.
Okay.
CrowdStrike has been put into the study even though it has a problematic earnings line. So we'll see how the club reacts to a core company. What we're talking about is core, and we're seeing how the club reacts to a core company masquerading with no earnings right now. Maybe it's the emperor with no clothes. I'm not sure. We'll have to see.
Either that, or it's early stage Amazon, or it's Tesla.
It's early stage investing, right? CrowdStrike is a darling right now of many of the commentators that you see on television.
Yeah, I know your friend Josh Brown likes it quite a bit, so it's worth a closer look. Okay, here's another technology stock. I believe these guys are probably a direct competitor to Paychex, at least in part of the business. They appear to be a little broader on the enterprise side, but I know it's a Tom Gardner favorite. It's got a little bit stronger return forecast, and again, as with any Ken Kavula stock, he can't sleep nights if he doesn't see this. So
the up, straight, and parallel, yeah. I want to say that in the beginners sessions that we did at Bink 2 weeks ago, we used Paychex as our example stock, and then we always start out a beginner's class by teaching them that you never look at a stock in isolation. So we kept bringing up Paycom and comparing Paychex to Paycom. And then at the wrap-ups, we did one wrap-up on Paychex real time and another wrap-up on Paycom. And to be honest, Paycom seemed to be the stronger of the two companies, although I I think the final conclusion was that not many of us would be unhappy owning either one of them. They were both pretty decent purchases. Again, what attracted me to this one is that sales growth forecast of 18% plus. That's the kind of sales growth we're looking for in this portfolio. We're calling it, what are we calling it? Aggressive? That's not the word
assertive.
we're using.
Assertive.
Assertive. That's the word we're using. Okay. I like that a lot. And this one has a par to match that assertive sales growth rate. It has a par of 16. I think this is an extremely undervalued company right now, and I'll tell you one good reason for it. You can find another half dozen probably, but here's the one I think. They just developed a very new part of their platform, which gives a lot of authority to the payee, not the payor, but the payee in a payroll system.
Mm-hmm.
And what they've found is that that new twist, that new piece of the platform has cannibalized some of their older products. And what they didn't count on was the fact that they were going to sell a lot of the new product, but at the expense of their own older product. They are in the process of fixing that, dealing with that, and the newer products are just moving as quickly as they possibly can move. They're giving Paychex a real run for their money because Paychex does not have an equivalent feature in any of their platforms to match what Paycom has right now. But the market seems to be focusing on the fact that in the near term, and we're talking 3 to 6 months, in the near term, Paycom is going to have a little bit of slowdown in earnings and slowdown in the growth of sales as they transition from their older products to their newer products. The analyst community is almost unanimous when it says when we look out 3 quarters or 4 quarters, we see nothing but stellar growth for the company. If you're a value line fan, I would urge you to read the value line on Paycom. It's extremely complimentary and optimistic about the company itself, and it gives you a lot of ammunition to use. And when you're looking at a company that's undervalued, if you're afraid to buy it, I understand, but many times that's the best time that you can possibly be buying a company when the rest of the market doesn't understand that the problem that the company is facing is going to be temporary and it's not going to be terminal. It's going to be something that the company gets through, and it's not going to be enough to destroy the company or to make it lose market share. So I really like Paycom, and I would suggest it as the second candidate, the second strong candidate for Buttonwood, Mark.
Yeah, we'll stack it up against the other 3 and see what it looks like. I do notice this out here. It'll be kind of interesting to see what Value Line does with their 3 to 5 year sales forecast, because that is tempering or moderating this, or at least it's threatening to do that. And I just wonder if maybe there's a little bit of pessimism. That pessimism is reflected here. You can see that there's actually a discernible drop off to the high and low forecasts for the 3 to 5 year forecast from Value Line. So, maybe that. Go ahead.
And we've talked about that. I'm in 2 clubs that owns this particular company, and we've talked about that in one of the clubs. And we've posited that maybe a lot of it has to do with the fact that Paycom is pretty much a good, solid, middle-of-the-road, medium-sized company, but 3 to 5 years from now, it will be transitioning to what we probably will be calling a large company. And the slowdown in growth is to be expected as you go from medium-sized to large. And that might be part of what's going on with this these Value Line numbers.
Yeah, I would buy that. I mean, even if it slows down to 14 to 16, it's still
that's still real hefty for a large company. Yeah.
Yep. So yeah, I do like this one.
Just as a side part on Paycom, Our club, Happy Destiny, purchased it. It went down immediately, so we decided to do a typical BI thing. We bought some more. But our thesis is pretty close to what Ken was talking about. The person who actually brought it is in the audience. That's Ken Williams. But his thesis is very close to what Ken Kavula has there too.
Yeah, they seem to be executing well on the commercial front for sure. All right, and our last one to mention is an old warrior that's no stranger to most of us. Intuit, and
well, and again, the sales growth is fascinating to me. This is a large company. This is a good-sized company, and a good-sized company growing somewhere around 15% is not to be sneezed at. Most of you know the company Intuit, tax products, and many more things than just tax products, but Intuit is accounting tools, all kinds of different things. It's a software company, no doubt about that. And the PAR numbers are this one, Mark, I had a little bit of trouble getting my arms around the proof versus the PAR. I don't like it when they get to be 2 to 1, and this one is approaching 2 to 1. You know, the PAR is almost twice what the proof is. So I'm not as positive on Intuit. Mark asked me to come up with some candidates, and I'll tell you that finding candidates in the tech field with high growth at decent prices and with histories that I found appealing is an extremely difficult task. So I think I came up with 4 pretty decent ones. I know which 2 that I prefer. I like all 4 of them. I'm just not sure that I would buy all 4 of them at the present prices.
Right. And, you know, the one thing that I do take away from here is going back to Paycom, you know, you ask yourself the question, how long can that 14, 16, or 18% growth persist? And then I look at this slide and I see a company that is much more mature, much larger, that is still managing to find, you know, 14 or 15% growth potential, you know, in a comparable type area. And the other thing that's kind of interesting is the PE ratio of 30 versus, I think back here we had 15. So I think there's a potential for PE expansion with Paycom, maybe a little compression here with Intuit, but yeah, I think if that number came down a little bit, that probably brings us into high double digits and gets us closer to this number. If you really wanted to crank down on it, I do also like it's pretty easy to warm up to a company that has such a powerful combination of financial strength, EPS stability, and quality.
Absolutely. And you know, if you want to go around shouting up straight and parallel, there's a poster child for it right there.
Yeah, even the stock price. I mean, they zoomed up in 2021, but they've continued to head up and to the right, and this was pretty good too. So thanks, Ken. So what I did is I took the 4 companies. Ken loves to do this with his club portfolios. Put them in at 0 shares, so they don't actually affect the weighted averages. But there's the 4 companies. And what that allows us to do is to look for the companies that have the higher projected annual return. We're sorted by this column from highest to lowest. So Veeva, I think that one's a slam dunk.
Now, I know the immediate question is going to be, Mark, why does the PAR in this chart not match the PAR in the study that we just did?
Probably mid-update. I know a couple of these are definitely in the current update set. They'll be much closer after the next couple of days, would be my answer.
Okay.
So they'll be pretty close to that.
Well, I like that. When we do it this way, it makes it quite clear to me that at the moment the best two choices, and I have no reason to not believe the numbers. So at the moment, I would put Veeva and Paycom into the portfolio. That still leaves us one spot in the next month or two in the next couple of weeks to fill. We have enough money for 3 spots right now, don't we?
We will by the next meeting, yeah, or by the end of
Okay.
the month.
Yeah. So I would move to put Veeva and Paycom into the Buttonwood portfolio, and I don't see anything wrong with keeping Intuit and Fortinet in the back of our minds as possibilities going into the future.
Yeah, and maybe we bring that the suggested challenge to Fortinet with CrowdStrike and a couple others.
Interesting to do that. Absolutely.
Right, so we'll go ahead and add those two, and then we may actually achieve the point of challenging the one at the bottom here fairly soon.
Well, that was my other question, that when we put it in, we had good reasons for putting it in, but I'm looking at the growth number, and I'm saying to myself, if we're going to be assertive on growth, maybe we have to watch when we look at companies that are growing or expected to grow in the future at a 5 to 6%. Maybe that's not enough growth for this portfolio, and a 5% par, maybe that's not enough par for this portfolio. And those are great things for a club to do on a not on an every meeting basis, but 2 or 3 times a year, to look at the bottom of your list and ask yourself, is there still a place for those companies that sit at the bottom of the list? Sometimes the answer is yes. Sometimes the answer is no, chuck it. So we'll revisit that in a couple of weeks too, probably.
Yeah, and at the time we do that, we'll have basically our resting place or our steady state projected in return for the portfolio, and that will tell us if we need to do something at that point in time. So we'll
Yeah,
have
we
some
still have a fair percentage of cash in this portfolio, almost 18% cash, and it's going in there, folks. Remember, at a par of 4.5. That's better than last year when it was going in at a par of 0.5. But it's in there at 4.5 now. But that's still the lowest par of all of them. So when you buy a stock with a par, hopefully up near the top of the list, not in the bottom, when you buy it there, then you're going to move that bottom average fairly quickly yet. So
Yep.
We still have the opportunity to push this portfolio up to 15, 16, 17% if we're picking the right stocks.
And I suspect we will. All right, here's just a quick opportunity to comment on something we've looked at over the last few weeks. The nutshell is that the consulting industry appears to be going through what could be at least a slowdown phase for a few years. And it really came up as it applied to this company, which went gangbusters for nearly 20 years and then has kind of trailed off. They have a new CEO that's been in place for a few years now, and they just don't appear to be making much headway. So in one of Ken's investment clubs, they decided to challenge Cognizant with other consulting type companies. And so we'll let Ken brief us on where they ended up. This is what we covered a couple weeks ago. What did you end up actually discussing and deciding, Ken?
Okay, well, here's the study in a nutshell. We brought the study down to Cognizant, which Mark has marked, ACN, which is the second one on this list, EXLS, which is the third one from the bottom, and Genpact, which is the G right above EXLS. That was 4 of the companies, and then we also had Infosys in the study because we felt it was a direct competitor of Cognizant, INFY. We heard comprehensive reports on all 5 of the companies, including the one we owned, and we had owned Cognizant for maybe a dozen or more years, maybe as much as 15 years we had owned it. And we heard pretty good reports on all of them. I'll give you what I think was maybe the tipping point for each one of the reports. the stock watcher, who was an experienced investor for Cognizant, made the point that she no longer felt Cognizant was a true growth company, that if you looked at the last 7 or 8 or 9 quarters, you saw that they were flat or declining, both in sales and in earnings. And the price was tending to follow that same pattern. It was staying fairly flat, moving up and down in a fairly narrow range. And she just thought we could do a lot better than Cognizant. She wanted to stay in this same industry. She felt there was a lot of good candidates, and that essentially was her report. We heard a report on ACN. It's a huge company in more than 50 companies, over 500,000 employees throughout the world, doing all kinds of consulting in all kinds of industries. And we felt that this was just the cream of the crop if you were looking for a large, stable, consistently growing kind of company. Nothing but basically good things to say about Accenture, other than the fact that it was very, very large, and that kind of put a cap on its sales. That being said, the rates of growth for Accenture were still very healthy compared to what you might expect from a large blue chip company. They were in excess of 9 or 10% in a lot of the categories, and that gave it some nice plus points. We then looked at Infosys, and the person that did the report on Infosys focused in on the fact that they have been consistently buying back shares of stock for the last 10 or 12 years. When you graph the number of shares available for Infosys, you see a straight line, and it's moving in a downward direction. Fewer shares going along. Now, the theory is that you do that to boost your earnings per share, and yet the distance between the sales and the earnings on the graphs kept increasing rather than decreasing. So instead of boosting the profit margins by buying back shares, they were barely able to keep the profit margins consistent. In fact, the profit margins were gently declining over the time of stock buyback purchase. The person that did the study felt that that spoke to extreme competition, and it wasn't the time for us to enter into a stock that was in such a competitive niche in this information tech area. We then went to Genpact, a medium-sized company, doing a lot of the same things as the other 4 companies do. Many different kinds of industries that it's involved with, helping companies become more efficient, helping them make more money by doing things in a different way. And the key fact that kept many people away from voting for Genpact was that they do more than 50% of their business in India. And India is one of the lesser profitable markets in the world. The margins that they can get from the Indian businesses do not match the margins that they can get from businesses in other parts of the world. Genpact is trying to move business to other places in the world, but still they do more than 50% of their business in India. We moved to EXLS, a small company. EXLS has been doing AI before AI was fashionable. They've been running artificial intelligence models, helping companies become more efficient for the last 4 or 5 years. They have a beautiful history of consistent sales growth and consistent earnings growth and consistently increasing margins. All in all, it came down to a question: did you want a big stock that had a lot of potential, or did you want a small stock that had a lot of potential? The 2 contenders for best company were Excel Services and Accenture. And when it was all said and done, Excel Services ended up winning the vote by 2 votes. We very rarely, when we do a challenge, have 2 companies rise and almost tie in what's happening. We think that either company deserves a second look if you're looking for a company. And in our particular portfolio, we had room for a good, solid, small company, and we felt that we had enough representation already from the larger companies with the slightly slower growth. So we went with Excel Services. We actually bought a relatively small holding. We sold all of our Cognizant. That generated about $85,000. We put $25,000 of it back into Excelis, and then, just like Kevin said in his investment club, we heard about Paycom and the fact that it was extremely undervalued, and we put another $25,000 into Paycom. We have a member departing that we have to pay out, and we suggested that if we still liked Excel Services as much next month as we like it this month, it'll be an appropriate time to make a second lot purchase in Excel Services with whatever money we have left over when we come to the meeting next month. That's the study in 4 minutes. The study took a lot longer than that, but that's the study in about 4 minutes.
I'll tell you, there's some really cool study opportunities here. I would throw NICE onto that pile also, and it's in
That was a
Paycom.
question I was going to ask. Ken, why didn't you put NICE into that? Did you not feel it was a good competitor? It's really in a different field?
We didn't feel that NICE was a direct competitor or a direct peer of any of these companies. I didn't want to say that out loud because I know Mark thinks it is, but this club didn't think that it was a competitor, no. So we are looking at NICE, but we think it's more of a competitor to Paycom, and we already own Paycom.
Yeah. Good stuff. Well, thanks, Ken. All right, just a little bit of a preview for the next time we come together in celebration of our returning from our travels. This is a Wall Street Journal article that's provided by Len Douglas in our forum that is just simply noticing the slowdown in the boating companies and the RV companies. Fairly significant over here on the right. Number of orders placed for RVs and motor homes, and the boating industry has been hit. And just as a quick reminder, we know that this industry is pretty cyclical, pretty good top up here on the upside, and then I don't think any of us should be surprised when this type of thing happens. This is an economically sensitive industry. You can see where they seem to be headed this year, and just wonder if it might be a buying opportunity based on a potential overreaction to what's going on. You can see the multi-year high up here. This is one of our best small companies, so we're obviously pretty connected to it, and these numbers are elevated now. So good, clean fun. We'll probably cover that in a little bit greater detail. Here's your reminder that we do archive all of these presentations, whether they're bull sessions or roundtables, on the YouTube channel. Go ahead and subscribe to that, and we'll let you know anytime new content is added. And we'll just close out with a couple of slides. It's hot here, and the dog perfectly captures it. And then we also had a moment where the United States was once again connected with Canada across a brand new bridge here in the Detroit area. So with that, I think we've run a little bit long, but Ken, we really appreciate that club update on the consulting companies, and I hope the audience enjoyed it too. Any other closing thoughts?
Nothing except to say that I'm kind of excited or re-energized after coming back from convention and finding out that the clubs that I'm involved with are increasingly finding new members, and we're increasingly becoming more interested in doing a little bit more of the more basic homework that has to be done to run a decent portfolio. It's re-energized myself and my wife, and we're ready for another 4 or 5 years of the same here.
Well, fantastic. We do have a club visit about a month from now where we'll get to spend some time with some really accomplished investors in the Detroit area. So good, clean fun. So with that, we'll sign off. Again, we'll come back and probably talk a little bit more about recreational stuff. But for now, everybody get out there, stay cool, and have a good week.
Good afternoon, everybody.